Racist man spat in the face of a black royal guard. What happened next shocked everyone. The crowd in front of the palace gates froze as a loud gasp spread like wildfire. A man, tall and wearing a scowl that could cut through steel, stepped up to a black royal guard stationed by the main entrance. Without warning, he spat directly in the guard's face. The sound of the spit landing was louder than anyone expected, breaking the stunned silence like a slap. For a moment, no one moved. The guard, impeccably dressed in his ceremonial uniform, stood still as a statue. His dark brown eyes locked onto the man's with a calm intensity that seemed unshaken by the disrespect. Onlookers stared, wide-eyed, unsure of what would happen next. And then it did. The guard took a step forward, his hand slowly moving toward the hilt of his ceremonial sword. The man who had spat at him sneered, taunting him with a mocking grin. The tension in the air was unbearable, and someone in the crowd muttered, "Oh no, this is going to get ugly." But what happened next caught everyone off guard. Earlier that morning, the guard, whose name was Marcus Hayes, had prepared for his shift like any other day. Marcus was known for his discipline and unshakable demeanor. A former Marine, he had joined the Royal Guard as one of the first black men in its history, a point of pride for his family, but a source of tension among the small but vocal group in the community. The day had started peacefully. Tourists milled around the palace gates, taking photos and waving at the guards. Children giggled as they tried to get a reaction from the stoic sentinels, and Marcus remained unfazed as always. Across the street, James Wilkins watched the scene with disdain. James, a middle-aged man with a reputation for stirring up trouble, had long nursed a grudge against what he called symbols of power that don't deserve respect. His bigotry had led him to confront Marcus before, though his attempts had always been met with Marcus's calm silence. Today, James seemed particularly agitated. He clenched his fists as he watched tourists taking selfies with Marcus. "It's sickening," he muttered under his breath. Fueled by his own anger, James crossed the street, pushing through the crowd until he stood directly in front of Marcus. At first, he said nothing. He stared at Marcus, his face twisted in a sneer. Marcus didn't flinch. His training taught him to expect all kinds of behavior, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. James spat, the act deliberate and filled with malice. The spit hit Marcus's face, dripping onto the polished gold trim of his uniform. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and a child asked loudly, "Why did he do that?" A woman whispered to her friend, "He's going to get arrested, right?" Marcus didn't move for a long moment. His chest rose and fell as he took a slow, measured breath. He wiped his face with a cloth from his pocket, his expression unreadable. But beneath the surface, Marcus was battling a storm of emotions, anger, humiliation, and a sense of duty. The tension thickened as James stood his ground, his grin defiant. A few onlookers shouted for security, while others pulled out their phones to record. Marcus finally broke his stillness, taking a single step forward. The atmosphere was electric as the crowd held its collective breath. Marcus's hand brushed against the hilt of his sword, and James flinched ever so slightly, though he tried to hide it. Before anyone could react further, the heavy oak doors of the palace creaked open, and another guard stepped out, his face grim. He walked toward Marcus, his boots clicking on the pavement. What would happen next was anyone's guess. Would Marcus retaliate? Would James be arrested? The answers would come, but not before another shocking twist that left the crowd in utter disbelief. The second guard, a tall man named Captain Edward Barnes, approached Marcus with deliberate steps. Edward was a veteran of the Royal Guard, known for his sharp instincts and strict adherence to protocol. His expression was unreadable, but the crowd could sense the weight of the moment. "Guard Hayes," Edward said in a firm but calm voice, "stand down." Marcus nodded slightly, his hand releasing the hilt of his sword. He stepped back into position, his posture once again rigid and professional. Edward turned his attention to James, who still wore that smug grin, though his confidence seemed to waver under the captain's steely gaze. "You've just committed a criminal act. Edward said, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Assaulting a member of the Royal Guard is punishable by law. You will be detained immediately." James let out a harsh laugh, attempting to mask his nervousness. "Assault? I didn't lay a hand on him. What are you going to do? Arrest me for spitting?" "Yes," Edward replied without hesitation. "That's exactly what we're going to do." Before James could respond, 2 palace security officers emerged from the crowd, their movements swift and precise. They grabbed James by the arms, and his bravado dissolved as he began to struggle. "This is ridiculous," James shouted, his voice rising in pitch. "I didn't do anything wrong. He's just a guard, a puppet." Edward's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped low, filled with quiet authority. "He is a soldier, a protector of this nation, and you will show respect. Take him away." The crowd erupted in applause as James was dragged off, but the moment wasn't over yet. A young boy, no older than 7, stepped forward, tugging on his mother's hand. The boy's wide eyes were fixed on Marcus. "Why didn't you fight back?" the boy asked, his voice clear and innocent. Marcus looked down at the child, his face softening for the first time that day. He knelt to the boy's level, his voice calm and steady. Because being strong doesn't mean fighting. Sometimes it means staying calm, even when people are unkind. The boy nodded, his expression thoughtful, and Marcus stood back up, resuming his post. The crowd began to disperse, the tension slowly dissolving into murmurs of admiration and lingering disbelief. As the hours passed, Marcus's shift continued, though the morning's incident remained fresh in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of James's twisted face or the stinging humiliation he felt when the spit landed. Yet Marcus had endured worse during his time as a Marine. He reminded himself that strength wasn't just physical, it was mental too. Later that evening, Marcus returned home to his modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. His wife, Lila, greeted him at the door with a warm smile that faltered when she saw the tightness in his jaw. "What happened?" she asked, concern etched in her features. Marcus hesitated before recounting the day's events. Lila listened intently, her hands clenched into fists by her sides. "I can't believe someone would do that to you," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You didn't deserve that." "No," Marcus agreed, "but I can't let people like him get to me. If I lose control, he wins." Lila nodded, though her eyes still burned with indignation. "You're stronger than most, Marcus, but this can't keep happening. People need to know that this behavior isn't acceptable." The next morning, the video of the incident had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story, framing Marcus as a symbol of dignity and restraint. Social media was ablaze with praise for his composure, but not everyone was on his side. Some commenters echoed James's hateful rhetoric, calling Marcus weak for not retaliating. Marcus scrolled through the comments with a mix of emotions: pride at the support he received and frustration at the negativity. He couldn't help but wonder if he had done the right thing by staying silent. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Opening it, he found Captain Edward standing there, his expression serious. "Captain," Marcus said, surprised. "We need to talk," Edward replied. "There's been a development." The development, as it turned out, was far more shocking than Marcus could have imagined. James had been released from custody after paying a fine, but instead of fading into the background, he had doubled down on his actions. He had taken to social media, posting a video in which he mocked Marcus and made thinly veiled threats. "People like him think they can just stand there and take whatever we throw at them," James sneered in the video. "But they don't belong here, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The video had gone viral, drawing both outrage and support. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he watched it. This wasn't over. James wasn't going to stop, and Marcus realized he might have to confront him again, this time, without the safety net of his uniform or the authority of the Royal Guard. Edward looked at Marcus, his face grim. "We're increasing security around the palace, but I wanted to warn you. This man seems determined to escalate things. Be careful." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. He didn't know what James would do next, but he had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't end with a few hateful words. As night fell, Marcus sat in his living room staring out the window. Lila sat beside him, her hand resting on his. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we'll face it together." Marcus nodded, but his mind was racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that James's next move would be bigger and far more dangerous. The next morning, as Marcus prepared for another day on duty, his phone buzzed with an alert. He opened it to see a chilling message: "Watch your back." Marcus stared at the message on his phone, his mind racing. The words were simple, but the threat behind them was loud and clear. He showed the message to Lila, whose face tightened with worry. "This is serious, Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to report this." "I will," Marcus replied, trying to project calm he didn't entirely feel. "Captain Barnes needs to know. If James is escalating, we need to be prepared." Lila nodded, but her worry didn't ease. She watched as Marcus left for the palace, her heart heavy with unease. At the palace, Marcus handed his phone to Captain Barnes, who read the message with a grim expression. "We'll alert the authorities and trace the source," Barnes said. "But Marcus, I need you to be extra cautious. This man seems unhinged." "I'll keep my eyes open," Marcus assured him. The rest of the day passed in a tense blur. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every face in the crowd seemed suspicious, every shadow a potential threat. By the time his shift ended, he was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Later that evening, Marcus and Lila sat together, trying to unwind. The television was on, but neither of them was paying attention. Lila broke the silence. "Do you think he'll come after you again?" she asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but I can't let it stop me from doing my job." Before Lila could respond, there was a loud bang at the front door. Both of them froze. The bang came again, louder this time, as if someone was trying to break it down. Marcus motioned for Lila to stay back and moved toward the door. His training kicked in, his body tense but controlled. He opened the door a crack, ready for anything. To his shock, there was no one there. He stepped outside, scanning the street. The neighborhood was quiet, the street lights casting long shadows. He saw no movement, but a faint noise caught his attention. A car engine revving in the distance. Lila appeared behind him. "What is it?" "Nothing," Marcus said, though his gut told him otherwise. He closed the door and bolted it, his senses on high alert. The next morning, Marcus woke to find a package on the front porch. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. A chill ran down his spine. "Don't touch it," Lila said, her voice urgent. "It could be dangerous." Marcus nodded, calling the authorities. An officer arrived shortly after and carefully examined the package. Inside, they found a single photograph of Marcus in his Royal Guard uniform, his face circled in red ink. Beneath the circle, in bold letters, was a single word: "Soon." The officer's face darkened. "We'll start a full investigation. In the meantime, you should consider staying somewhere else for a while." Marcus refused. "I'm not running. If he wants to face me, he'll find I'm not so easily intimidated." Marcus returned to work later that day, the photograph still fresh in his mind. As he stood at his post, scanning the crowd, his instincts told him something was wrong. His eyes locked on a figure standing near the back, partially obscured by a group of tourists. It was James. James wasn't hiding. He stared directly at Marcus, his expression filled with hate. He mouthed something, and though Marcus couldn't hear the words, the meaning was clear. "This isn't over." Marcus's heart pounded, but he didn't move. He knew James wanted a reaction, wanted to provoke him. Instead, Marcus held his ground, his expression calm and unflinching. James lingered for a few minutes before disappearing into the crowd. Marcus felt a surge of relief, but knew this wasn't the end. That evening, Marcus received another message. This one was a video. He hesitated before opening it, his hand trembling slightly. The video showed James standing in what appeared to be an empty parking garage. "This isn't about you," James said, his tone cold and deliberate. "It's about what you represent." and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happens to people like you." The video ended abruptly, leaving Marcus with a sinking feeling in his chest. He showed the video to Captain Barnes the next morning, who promised to escalate the investigation. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that James was planning something big. Days passed without incident, but the tension remained. Marcus went about his duties, always scanning the crowd, always on edge. Lila grew more anxious, her fear for Marcus's safety evident in every word, every glance. Then one afternoon, the unthinkable happened. As Marcus stood at his post, a loud explosion rocked the palace gates. Smoke and debris filled the air, and screams erupted from the crowd. Marcus was thrown off his feet, his ears ringing from the blast. He struggled to get up, his vision blurred as chaos unfolded around him. Through the smoke, he saw James standing nearby, a twisted smile on his face. In his hand was a remote detonator, his thumb poised to press the button again. Marcus's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The first explosion was just the beginning. The smoke hung thick in the air, blurring Marcus's vision as he scrambled to his feet. Screams pierced through the chaos, and the acrid smell of burnt metal and dust choked him. His training kicked in, assess the situation, ensure safety, neutralize threats. But this wasn't just a battlefield. It was a scene of terror, and James stood at the center of it. James's twisted grin widened as he raised the remote detonator, taunting Marcus with his audacity. "Didn't expect this, did you?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to act, but every move had to be calculated. Civilians were everywhere, and James held all the power in his hands, literally. Another explosion could rip through the crowd at any moment. "Everyone get back," Marcus bellowed, his voice firm and commanding. People stumbled over one another in a frantic attempt to flee. The remaining guards rushed to the scene, their weapons drawn, but the presence of the detonator held them back. James waved the remote in the air. "Nobody move or this whole place goes up." His eyes locked onto Marcus, the hatred in them palpable. "This is your fault, you know. You should have stayed in your lane." Marcus slowly raised his hands, signaling to the other guards to hold their positions. "James, you don't want to do this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You've made your point. Don't hurt these people." James barked a laugh. My point? My point is that people like you think you can take everything from us, our jobs, our traditions, our country. But today, I take something back." Marcus took a step forward, his hand still raised. "You're not taking anything back, James. You're just proving how small you are. These people didn't do anything to you. Let them go." For a moment, James faltered. His hand trembled, and the smug confidence on his face wavered. But just as quickly, his anger flared again, and his thumb hovered over the button. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking. Marcus stopped, his heart pounding. The crowd had mostly cleared, but a few stragglers remained, frozen in fear. Marcus's mind raced. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. From the corner of his eye, Marcus spotted Captain Barnes, crouched behind a column with a team of guards. Barnes met Marcus's gaze and gave a subtle nod, signaling that they were ready to intervene. But any misstep could be catastrophic. Marcus took a deep breath. "James, look at me," he said. "You don't have to do this. Whatever you're angry about, we can talk about it, but not like this." "Talk," James sneered. "Nobody listens to people like me unless we make them. And this is how you want to be remembered? As a terrorist? As a coward who hurt innocent people? You think that makes you strong?" James hesitated again, his grip on the remote loosening slightly. Marcus saw the opening and took another step forward. "You're better than this," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Put it down, let these people go." James's hand trembled, his anger and doubt warring inside him. For a moment, it seemed like he might listen. But then a sharp crack echoed through the air. A sniper from the tactical team had fired, aiming for James's hand. The bullet struck true, knocking the detonator out of his grasp. James let out a howl of pain as the device clattered to the ground. "Move in." Captain Barnes shouted and the guards surged forward. Marcus didn't hesitate. He tackled James to the ground, pinning him as the other guards secured the area. James thrashed beneath him, shouting incoherently, "You think this is over? It's not over. You'll see." Marcus tightened his grip, his face inches from James's. "It is over. You've lost." As the dust settled, the scene was a mix of relief and devastation. Civilians were led to safety, some shaken but unharmed. The bomb squad secured the remaining explosives, ensuring no further danger. Marcus stood to the side, his chest heaving as he watched James being led away in cuffs. The man's face was a mask of defiance, but the fight had left his eyes. Captain Barnes approached Marcus, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You handled that well. You saved lives today." Marcus nodded, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily on him. "This isn't just about today, Captain. People like James don't stop. They just find new ways to spread their hate." Barnes's expression darkened. "We'll deal with them, Marcus. But for now, take a moment. You've earned it." That night, Marcus returned home to find Leela waiting for him, her face a mixture of relief and fear. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I saw the news," she whispered. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, though the events of the day replayed in his mind like a broken record. "It's over for now." Leela pulled back, looking into his eyes. "Marcus, what if it happens again? What if someone else comes after you?" Marcus didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the fight wasn't just his. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been targeted, silenced, or made to feel less than human. As he sat in the quiet of their living room, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time the message was different. "You stopped one of us, but there are more." His heart sank. The battle wasn't over. Marcus's hand trembled as he read the message. The weight of its implications hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at the screen, his mind racing with questions. Who sent this? How many more people were involved? What would they do next? Leela, noticing the change in his expression, moved closer. "Marcus, what is it?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He showed her the message, and her face paled. "You need to go to the police with this," she said. "They need to know." "I will," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "But whoever sent this wants me scared. They want me to feel like I can't protect myself or anyone else. I won't give them that satisfaction." The next morning, Marcus met with Captain Barnes at the palace. The captain read the message, his jaw tightening. "This changes everything," he said. "We're not dealing with just one man anymore. This could be a network." "I want to help," Marcus said firmly. "I won't sit on the sidelines while these people plan their next move." Barnes hesitated. "You're already a target, Marcus. Getting involved could put you and your family in even more danger." "They're already in danger," Marcus replied. "Hiding won't make it go away. I need to do something." Barnes studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right, we'll bring you in on the investigation, but you follow our lead. No taking unnecessary risks." That evening, Marcus sat with Leela to discuss the situation. "They want to intimidate me," he said, "but I can't just stand by. If we don't push back, they'll only get bolder." Leela's eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. "I trust you, Marcus. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," he said, though he knew there were no guarantees. Over the next few days, Marcus worked closely with the investigative team. They combed through James's connections, looking for anyone who might be involved. The search led them to an online forum filled with hate-filled rhetoric and coded messages. The posts were disturbing, but one thread stood out: a discussion about an upcoming event that promised to send a message. The investigators worked tirelessly to decipher the clues, but time wasn't on their side. The posts hinted at a location and a date, 3 days from now, but the exact details were unclear. "This could be anything," one investigator said, frustration evident in his voice. "A rally, an attack, or just empty talk." Marcus's gut told him it was more than talk. "We can't take any chances," he said. If there's even a small chance they're planning something, we need to be ready. As the date approached, tensions ran high. Security was tightened around the palace and other key locations, and undercover officers were deployed to monitor potential threats. Marcus volunteered to be part of the field team, despite Barnes's reservations. On the night of the supposed event, Marcus found himself in an unmarked car parked near a downtown warehouse, a location flagged by the investigation. The area was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the occasional passing car and the distant hum of the city. Inside the warehouse, a group of men had gathered. Through binoculars, Marcus recognized one of them as a man who had been active on the forum. The others were strangers, but their body language suggested they were there for something serious. The team listened carefully through a surveillance device planted earlier. The men's conversation was chilling. "This is just the beginning," one of them said. "After tonight, they'll know we're not afraid to take action." "What's the plan?" another asked. The first man smirked. "We hit them where it hurts. The palace. Midnight." Marcus's blood ran cold. He relayed the information to the team, who quickly mobilized to intercept the group before they could carry out their plan. As the clock approached midnight, Marcus and the team stormed the warehouse. The element of surprise worked in their favor. Most of the men surrendered without a fight, but one bolted for the back exit. Marcus chased after him, his adrenaline surging. The man was fast, but Marcus was faster. He tackled the suspect just outside the warehouse, pinning him to the ground. "Who else is involved?" Marcus demanded, his voice sharp. "How many more of you are there?" The man sneered. "You think stopping us here will make a difference? We're everywhere." Back at headquarters, the arrests were celebrated as a significant victory, but Marcus couldn't shake the man's words. The threat wasn't over. This was just one cell in what could be a much larger network. As he returned home that night, exhausted but resolute, Marcus found another envelope waiting on his doorstep. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message scrawled in red ink. "We see you. This isn't over." Marcus stared at the note, his mind racing. The bold, threatening words seemed to pulse on the page. His heart pounded as he scanned the street, his instincts screaming that he was being watched. But the night was quiet, the faint hum of crickets the only sound. He stepped back inside, locking the door behind him. Lila approached, her eyes widening when she saw the paper in his hand. "What is it this time?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus handed her the note. She read it, her face pale with fear. "Marcus, they're not stopping. This is escalating." "I know," Marcus said, his voice grim. "But that's exactly what they want, to intimidate us, make us back down. I won't give them that." "Maybe you should step back for a while," Lila urged. "Let the authorities handle it. You've already done so much." Marcus shook his head. "This isn't just about me, Lila. It's about standing up to people like them. If I step back now, they'll see it as a win. I can't let that happen." The next morning, Marcus brought the note to Captain Barnes. Barnes read it, his expression darkening. "They're escalating their tactics," he said. "This isn't just about intimidation anymore. They're trying to break you." "They won't," Marcus replied firmly. "But we need to figure out their next move. There's more to this network than we've uncovered." Barnes nodded. "The men we arrested are refusing to talk, but we're combing through their devices. It's only a matter of time before we find something useful." Marcus frowned. "We don't have time. They're planning something else. I can feel it." The breakthrough came later that day. A message recovered from one of the arrested men's phones revealed plans for a coordinated attack on multiple locations in the city. The targets were places of cultural and historical significance, designed to send a message of division and hatred. The palace was one of the primary targets. "This isn't just about you anymore, Marcus," Barnes said during a tense briefing. "This is about the entire city. We have to move fast." The team devised a plan to increase security at all potential targets, while simultaneously working to track down other members of the network. Marcus was assigned to the palace, his familiarity with the layout making him an essential part of the defense. That night, as Marcus stood guard outside the palace, the air was thick with tension. The streets were quieter than usual, a strange stillness settling over the city. The other guards were on high alert, their eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. Marcus's mind raced as he replayed the events of the past weeks. The hatred he had faced, the threats, the close calls, it all felt like it was building to something inevitable. And then it happened. A black van screeched to a halt near the gates. The side door slid open, and several masked figures jumped out, armed with makeshift weapons and carrying backpacks that looked suspiciously heavy. One of them raised a hand, and Marcus saw the glint of a detonator. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, drawing his weapon. "Drop everything and get on the ground." Instead of complying, the figure pressed the detonator. Marcus braced himself for an explosion, but nothing happened. A look of confusion crossed the masked man's face, and that hesitation was all Marcus needed. He sprinted forward, closing the distance in seconds. With a well-placed strike, he knocked the detonator out of the man's hand. The other guards surged in, taking down the remaining assailants. As the chaos unfolded, Marcus realized the backpacks were filled with fake explosives, designed to create fear rather than actual destruction. But the intent was clear: to disrupt, to divide, to terrorize. The attackers were taken into custody, their identities revealing ties to the same hate network Marcus and the team had been investigating. But as Marcus sat in the debriefing room later that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. "These people aren't giving up," he said to Barnes. "They'll keep trying in different ways until someone stops them." Barnes nodded. "And we will stop them." "Tonight was a win, Marcus. But you're right. It's not over." When Marcus returned home, the house was dark and quiet. Lila was waiting for him, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It was a false alarm," Marcus explained. "They didn't have real explosives, but they wanted us to think they did." Lila hugged him tightly. "I'm so glad you're okay. But Marcus, how much more of this can we take?" Marcus didn't have an answer. The fight felt endless, the hatred pervasive. But as he held Lila close, he made a silent promise. No matter how long it took, he would keep standing up for what was right. Just as he was about to head to bed, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting an update from the team. Instead, it was another message, this time a video. He pressed play, and his blood ran cold. The video showed a group of masked figures in a dimly lit room. One of them stepped forward, holding a picture of Marcus in his Royal Guard uniform. "This is your hero," the figure said, their voice distorted. "He can't protect you forever. We're just getting started." The video cut off abruptly, leaving Marcus staring at the screen, his hands clenched into fists. Marcus sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the blank screen of his phone. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the weight of the message settled on his shoulders. He replayed the video in his mind, the masked figures, the distorted voice, the blatant threat. Lila's voice broke through his thoughts. "What is it this time?" she asked softly, her tone carrying an edge of fear. Marcus showed her the video. Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears welled in her eyes. "They're still coming after you," she whispered. "Marcus, this is getting worse." "They're escalating," he said, his voice firm. "But that just means we're closing in on them. They're scared. That's why they're doing this." "Scared or not, they're dangerous," Lila said. "You need to tell Captain Barnes about this right away." Marcus nodded, already dialing the captain's number. As the phone rang, a thought gnawed at the back of his mind. How many more people were involved in this network? And how far were they willing to go? Captain Barnes called an emergency meeting at the palace the next morning. The investigative team reviewed the video, noting the details, the shadowy room, the visible edges of a flag in the background, and the mention of Marcus as a hero. "This is personal," Barnes said, his voice heavy. They're singling you out, Marcus, because you've become a symbol of resistance against them. Marcus remained calm, though the implications were clear. His actions, his restraint, and his refusal to back down had made him a target. But he wasn't about to let fear dictate his choices. "What's our next move?" Marcus asked. "We've already flagged the video and are working to trace its origin," one of the analysts said. "It was uploaded to an obscure site, but we have a lead on the IP address." "Good," Marcus said. "We need to find them before they strike again." As the day progressed, the team tracked the video to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Surveillance showed movement inside, dozens of individuals coming and going, some carrying equipment, others staying for long periods. "This could be their base of operations," Barnes said. "If we move in now, we might catch them off guard." The team planned a raid for that evening. Marcus insisted on joining despite Barnes's hesitation. "I need to be there," Marcus said. "This fight started because of me. I won't sit back while others risk their lives." Barnes reluctantly agreed, assigning Marcus to the entry team. As night fell, the team surrounded the warehouse. Marcus's heart pounded as he crouched behind a stack of crates, waiting for the signal to move. The air was thick with tension, a silence broken only by the occasional shuffle of boots. "Move in," Barnes's voice crackled over the radio. The team stormed the building, their movements swift and coordinated. Marcus was the first through the door, his weapon drawn as he scanned the dimly lit space. Inside, the warehouse was a chaotic mix of desks, computers, and makeshift sleeping quarters. "Clear," one officer shouted as they moved room by room. But as they reached the central area, they found it empty. No suspects, no signs of recent activity. Only the computers hummed quietly, their screens filled with encrypted files and coded messages. "They cleared out," Marcus said, frustration tightening his chest. "They knew we were coming." Barnes surveyed the room, his face grim. "They left in a hurry. They didn't have time to wipe everything. Let's see what we can salvage." Back at headquarters, the team pored over the data recovered from the warehouse. Files revealed a sprawling network of individuals connected by shared ideologies and coordinated plans. One document in particular caught Marcus's attention. A list of names and locations, marked with dates. "This is a hit list," Marcus said, his voice low. "These are their targets." The dates ranged from weeks ago to several days in the future. One date, just 2 days away, had a name that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Marcus Hayes. "They're coming for me," he said, his jaw tightening. Barnes leaned over the file. "We're not going to let that happen. We'll use this information to draw them out. They think they're hunting you. We'll turn it around and make them the prey." The plan was set in motion. The team used the list to stage a trap, leaking false information about Marcus's schedule to lure the attackers into a controlled environment. The operation required precision and patience, and every second felt like an eternity. On the night of the operation, Marcus found himself stationed at a decoy location, a public park just outside the city. Hidden cameras and undercover officers surrounded the area, while Marcus stood in plain view, his posture casual but alert. Minutes turned to hours and Marcus began to wonder if the plan would work. Then, just as the team was considering calling it off, movement caught his eye. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, its windows tinted. "They're here," Marcus whispered into his radio. The vehicle idled for a moment before the doors opened, and several masked figures stepped out. One of them carried a small device, its blinking red light unmistakable. "They got explosives," Marcus said, his pulse quickening. "Move now." The team sprang into action, surrounding the suspects before they could reach Marcus. A tense standoff ensued, the masked figures shouting threats as the officers ordered them to stand down. Then, in a sudden, desperate move, one of the suspects raised the device, his thumb hovering over the trigger. Marcus acted on instinct, drawing his weapon and firing a single, precise shot. The device fell to the ground and the suspect crumpled, clutching his shoulder. The other suspects dropped their weapons, surrendering as officers closed in. As the suspects were taken into custody, Marcus felt a wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the fight was far from over. The network was still out there, and their hatred burned as fiercely as ever. Back at headquarters, Barnes placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You did good tonight," he said. "But this isn't the end." Marcus nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "Then we keep fighting." When Marcus returned home, he found Leela waiting for him, her eyes filled with both relief and worry. She embraced him tightly, holding on as if she might lose him. "They won't stop, will they?" she asked. "No," Marcus admitted, "but neither will I." As they sat together in the quiet of their home, Marcus's phone buzzed again. He hesitated before checking it, bracing himself for more threats. But this time the message was different. It was a single sentence that sent a chill down his spine. "We know where you live." Marcus stared at the message on his phone, the words blurring as the weight of their meaning settled in. Leela, sitting beside him, saw the tension in his face and leaned over to look. Her breath caught. "They know where we live?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus stood abruptly, his mind racing. He walked to the window, peering into the dark street outside. Everything seemed quiet, but the message implied otherwise. "They're trying to scare us," he said, more to himself than to Leela. "But we can't let them." Leela followed him to the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Marcus, this is serious. If they know where we live, we're not safe here." "I'll call Captain Barnes," Marcus said, already reaching for his phone. "We'll figure this out." Within the hour, a security team arrived at their house. Barnes himself stepped through the door, his expression grim. He immediately began issuing orders, securing the perimeter and setting up surveillance. "We're not taking any chances," Barnes said. "You and Leela are being relocated to a safe house until we can assess the situation." Leela looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with worry. "I don't want to leave," she said quietly. "This is our home." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice soft. "But we need to be somewhere safe, just for now." Leela nodded reluctantly, and within minutes, they were escorted out of the house under heavy guard. The safe house was a modest, nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. It had all the essentials but lacked the warmth of home. Marcus and Leela unpacked the few belongings they had brought with them, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken fear. As the night wore on, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring into the darkness, his mind replaying the events of the past weeks. Every threat, every close call, it all seemed to be building towards something bigger. But what? The next morning, Barnes arrived at the safe house with an update. "We traced the message to a burner phone," he said. "It was dumped near a public park. No fingerprints, no leads." Marcus sighed, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "They're always one step ahead," he said. "We need to change the way we're playing this." Barnes nodded. "We've already started monitoring their online activity more aggressively. We intercepted a communication late last night. There's a meeting happening tomorrow, and it sounds like it's a big one. We're planning to move in." "I want to be there," Marcus said immediately. Barnes hesitated. "Marcus, this isn't just about you anymore. These people are targeting your family. You've done enough." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This fight isn't over until we dismantle their entire operation. I'm not sitting this one out." Barnes studied him for a moment before relenting. "All right, but you follow my lead. No heroics." The following evening, Marcus joined the team as they prepared to raid the meeting location, a sprawling, abandoned factory on the edge of town. The air was thick with anticipation as they reviewed the plan one final time. Drones circled overhead, providing live surveillance of the area. Inside the factory, dozens of individuals had gathered, their voices a low murmur as they discussed plans and exchanged materials. The tension was palpable as Marcus and the team moved into position. "On my signal," Barnes said quietly into his radio. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the team waited for the perfect moment to strike. Then Barnes gave the signal. "Go." The team stormed the factory, their movements swift and precise. Chaos erupted as suspects scattered, some attempting to flee while others fought back. Marcus moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, helping to secure suspects and confiscate materials. As the dust began to settle, Marcus noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A figure slipping out a side door, clutching a laptop. Marcus gave chase, his adrenaline surging as he pursued the fleeing suspect into the dark alleyways behind the factory. The suspect was fast, but Marcus was faster. He tackled the man to the ground, wrestling the laptop from his grip. The man struggled, shouting incoherently, but Marcus held firm until backup arrived. When they returned to the factory, the atmosphere was tense but victorious. The raid had been a success, yielding critical information about the network's operations, funding, and membership. Barnes clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Good work," he said. "This laptop could be the key to taking them down." Back at headquarters, the team combed through the laptop's contents. What they'd found was chilling. Detailed plans for coordinated attacks, lists of targets, and communications outlining their goals. But one file stood out, a folder labeled Phase 2. Inside, they found plans for a large-scale attack, more ambitious and destructive than anything they had seen before. The target: a major cultural festival happening in the city in just 3 days. "This isn't just about you anymore," Barnes said to Marcus. "This is about the whole city." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we stop them. Whatever it takes." As Marcus returned to the safe house that night, his mind was racing. The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Lila met him at the door, her face filled with questions. "What's going on?" she asked. "They're planning something big," Marcus said, "but we're going to stop them." Lila searched his face, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Marcus said, though he knew the path ahead would be anything but safe. As they sat together in the quiet of the safe house, Marcus's phone buzzed again. He picked it up, dreading what he might find. This time, the message was short but chilling. 3 days. Tick-tock. Marcus stared at the message, his jaw tightening. The taunting words were designed to unnerve him, but they only fueled his determination. He turned the phone toward Lila, who read the message with wide eyes. "They're counting down," she whispered. 3 days? Marcus, they're serious." "I know," he said, his voice steady but firm. "And so are we." The next morning, Marcus joined Captain Barnes and the team for an emergency briefing. The intelligence gathered from the raid was extensive but overwhelming. Blueprints of the festival grounds, lists of entry points, and diagrams of potential blast zones filled the table. "They've been planning this for months," one analyst said. "The level of coordination is unprecedented." Barnes nodded grimly. "We're deploying additional security to the festival, but we need to identify their leader. If we can take out the head of the operation, the rest will fall apart." Marcus studied the documents spread across the table. One name kept appearing in the communications: Dagger. "Who's Dagger?" Marcus asked. "Best we can tell, he's the mastermind," Barnes replied. "We haven't been able to trace him yet, but the messages suggest he'll be at the festival to oversee the attack." Marcus's mind raced. "If he's there, we can use that to our advantage. Draw him out." "That's the plan," Barnes said. "But we'll need to move carefully. One wrong step and they'll detonate before we can stop them." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Marcus worked closely with the team, reviewing the festival layout and planning the operation down to the smallest detail. Undercover officers would blend into the crowd, monitoring every corner while bomb squads stood ready to neutralize any threats. Despite the meticulous planning, the tension was palpable. The clock was ticking, and the margin for error was razor-thin. The day of the festival arrived, and the city buzzed with excitement. Thousands of people filled the streets, unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. Marcus, dressed in plain clothes, moved through the crowd, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. Through his earpiece, he heard updates from the team. "Sector 1 clear. One officer reported. No sign of suspicious activity. Keep looking, Barnes's voice replied. They're here somewhere. As Marcus navigated the festival, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Families laughed, children played, and music filled the air. This was what the attackers wanted to destroy, a sense of unity and joy that defied their hatred. Hours passed with no sign of Dagger or his team. Marcus's unease grew with each passing minute. Then a call came through his earpiece that made his heart pound. "We've got a possible ID on Dagger," an officer said. "He's near the main stage." Marcus moved quickly, weaving through the crowd toward the stage. When he arrived, he spotted a man standing near the sound equipment. He was tall, with a hood pulled low over his face, and he carried a large backpack. "That's him," Marcus said quietly into his mic. "I'm moving in." "Wait for backup," Barnes warned. "Don't engage alone." But Marcus's instincts told him time was running out. He approached the man cautiously, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his tone calm but firm. "Can I help you with something?" The man turned slowly, his face partially obscured by the hood. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "No," he said flatly. "I'm just enjoying the festival." Marcus's eyes flicked to the backpack. "Mind if I take a look in there?" The man smirked. "I think I'll pass." Before Marcus could react, the man bolted, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus gave chase, shouting into his earpiece. "Suspect fleeing west. He's heading toward the food court." Officers converged on the area, but the crowd made it difficult to move quickly. Marcus pushed through, his heart racing as he struggled to keep the man in sight. The chase led to a secluded alley behind the festival grounds. The man stopped, turning to face Marcus with a sinister grin. He reached into his backpack, pulling out a small device with a blinking light. "Don't move," Marcus said, drawing his weapon. "Put it down." "Or what?" the man sneered. "You'll shoot me." "Go ahead. You can't stop this." The tension was unbearable. Marcus's finger hovered over the trigger, but he knew firing might trigger the device. He needed to act fast, but carefully. Then from behind, another officer tackled the man, knocking the device from his hand. Marcus rushed forward, securing the device as the suspect was restrained. Back at headquarters, the team examined the device. It was a detonator, but incomplete, designed to trigger multiple bombs remotely. "This was just a test," Barnes said, his voice grim. "The real attack is still coming." Marcus clenched his fists. "We need to find the bombs. Now." That night, as Marcus sat in the safe house, his phone buzzed again. The message was short but chilling. "Nice try. 2 days left. Tick-tock." The message on Marcus's phone sent a shiver down his spine. 2 days left. Tick-tock. The taunt wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder that the attackers were still steps ahead, and the clock was relentlessly counting down. Lila leaned over his shoulder, her face pale. "Marcus, what does this mean? Didn't they catch the leader?" "No," Marcus said, frustration tightening his voice. "We caught one of their operatives, but Dagger is still out there. This message is from him." Lila's eyes widened. 2 days until what?" "Until their next attack," Marcus replied. "But we're going to stop them." The next morning, the investigative team worked tirelessly to piece together clues from the confiscated detonator and other evidence recovered during the chase. They mapped out potential targets based on the festival's infrastructure and locations marked in the intercepted communications. "This isn't just one target," Barnes said during a briefing. "Dagger's plan involves multiple simultaneous attacks. We're looking at a coordinated strike designed to cause maximum chaos." Marcus studied the map. "If we focus on the key choke points, we might be able to intercept them before they plant the bombs." "Agreed," Barnes said. "We're setting up checkpoints at all major locations. But we need boots on the ground. Marcus, I want you at the central hub near the festival's main stage. It's the most likely target." Marcus nodded. "I'll be ready." As the operation unfolded, the atmosphere was tense. Undercover officers blended into the crowd, scanning for suspicious activity, while bomb squads scoured the area for hidden devices. Every second felt like an eternity. Marcus, stationed at the central hub, kept a close watch on the crowd. His earpiece buzzed with updates from other teams, but so far, nothing significant had been found. Then his attention was drawn to a man standing near a utility shed. The man was fidgeting, glancing around nervously, and carrying a large duffel bag. Marcus's instincts kicked in. "I've got a possible suspect," he said quietly into his mic. Utility shed near the central hub, moving in. He approached the man slowly, his hand resting on his concealed weapon. "Excuse me," Marcus said. "Can I help you with something?" The man froze, his eyes darting to the duffel bag. Without warning, he bolted, running toward the stage. Marcus gave chase, shouting into his earpiece. "Suspect fleeing toward the main stage. He's carrying a bag. Possible explosive." The chase was chaotic, weaving through the dense crowd. The suspect reached the stage and dropped the bag, disappearing into the crowd before Marcus could catch him. Marcus sprinted toward the bag, his heart pounding as he crouched beside it. "Bomb squad to the main stage," Marcus said into his mic. "We've got a live one." The bomb squad arrived within minutes, their movements swift and precise. They carefully examined the bag and discovered a device inside. A complex bomb wired to detonate remotely. "It's active," one of the technicians said. "We're disarming it now." Marcus stood guard, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of the suspect. As the bomb squad worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a distraction. Then his earpiece crackled with an urgent message. "Explosive detected at the north entrance. Repeat, we've got another bomb." The team was stretched thin as multiple devices were discovered across the festival grounds. Each one required careful disarming, and time was running out. Marcus coordinated with the other teams, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to find Dagger," he said to Barnes over the radio. "He's here somewhere, and he's the only one who can call this off." "We're searching," Barnes replied. "Keep your eyes open." As Marcus moved through the festival, he spotted a familiar figure. A man with a hood pulled low over his face, standing near a parked van. Marcus's pulse quickened. It was Dagger. He approached cautiously, keeping his distance while signaling for backup. But before the team could arrive, Dagger turned and locked eyes with Marcus. His face twisted into a smirk, and he climbed into the van, speeding away. Marcus ran after him, shouting into his earpiece. "Dagger's on the move, heading west in a black van. I'm in pursuit." The chase tore through the city streets, the van weaving dangerously through traffic as Marcus pursued in an unmarked car. The tension was unbearable. Dagger was within reach, but one wrong move could cost them everything. As they approached a bridge, Dagger suddenly swerved, sending the van skidding to a stop. He jumped out, clutching another detonator, and ran toward the edge of the bridge. Marcus followed, drawing his weapon. "Stop!" he shouted. "It's over, Dagger." Dagger turned, his face twisted with defiance. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "This is just the beginning." His thumb moved toward the detonator, but Marcus didn't hesitate. With a single precise shot, he hit Dagger's hand, sending the detonator flying into the water below. Dagger screamed in pain as Marcus tackled him, pinning him to the ground. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice cold. Back at headquarters, the team celebrated the success of the operation. All the bombs had been disarmed, and Dagger was in custody. The network had been dealt a significant blow, but Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. As he returned to the safe house that night, exhausted but relieved, he received another message on his phone. This time, it was from an unknown number. Dagger was just a pawn. The real game is about to begin. The words on the screen hit Marcus like a blow. Dagger was just a pawn. The real game is about to begin. Lila, who had been sitting nearby, saw the look on his face and asked cautiously, "What now?" Marcus handed her the phone. She read the message and froze. "A pawn? Marcus, I thought Dagger was the mastermind. That's what we all thought, Marcus said, his jaw tightening. But this message is telling us otherwise. Someone else is pulling the strings. Layla's voice trembled. What if they're planning something worse? Something bigger? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stood and began pacing, his mind racing. If Dagger wasn't the leader, then who was? And what was their endgame? The next morning, Marcus and the team gathered for an emergency briefing. Captain Barnes stood at the head of the table, his face grim. We've been combing through everything we recovered from Dagger's operation, Barnes began. And we found something troubling. He gestured to a screen behind him, which displayed a series of encrypted messages. These were sent to Dagger over the past few months. They all come from one source, someone who goes by the codename Apex. Apex, Marcus repeated. What do we know about them? Not much, Barnes admitted. But whoever they are, they're the real leader of this network. They've been coordinating everything from the shadows, including Dagger's operation. One of the analysts chimed in. We've traced some of Apex's communications to a remote compound outside the city. It's heavily guarded, but it could be their base of operations. Barnes nodded. This is our chance to take them down. We're planning a raid for tonight. As night fell, Marcus found himself gearing up for what could be the most dangerous mission of his career. The compound was located deep in the woods, accessible only by a narrow, winding road. Drones had captured images of armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and intelligence suggested that Apex would be inside. This is it, Barnes said during the final briefing. We go in fast and hard. Apex is our priority. Capture if possible, but don't hesitate to neutralize if necessary. Marcus nodded, his resolve firm. Let's finish this. The team approached the compound under the cover of darkness, their movements silent and precise. As they breached the perimeter, the night exploded into chaos. Guards shouted and fired, but the team moved with practiced efficiency, taking them down one by one. Marcus led a smaller team into the main building, his weapon drawn and his senses on high alert. The interior was a maze of narrow hallways and locked doors, but they moved quickly, clearing each room as they advanced. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door. This has to be it, Marcus said, signaling for the breaching equipment. The door blew open, revealing a large, dimly lit room filled with monitors and computers. In the center stood a figure clad in black, their face obscured by a mask. Apex. You made it, the figure said, their voice distorted by a modulator. I've been expecting you. Marcus leveled his weapon. It's over. Hands where I can see them. Apex chuckled. You think this is over? This is just the beginning. Before Marcus could respond, Apex pressed a button on a nearby console. The monitors lit up, displaying live feeds of various locations around the city. Each feed showed a device, bombs similar to the ones they had encountered at the festival. You've stopped a few of my people, Apex said, but you can't be everywhere at once. Marcus's heart sank. How many are there? Apex tilted their head. Enough. The tension in the room was unbearable as Marcus relayed the information to the team. Barnes's voice crackled over the radio. We're mobilizing all units. Marcus, do whatever it takes to stop Apex. Marcus turned back to Apex, his mind racing. Call it off, he demanded. Whatever this is, it ends now. Apex didn't flinch. You think I care about your threats? This isn't about me. It's about the message. And by the time you figure it out, it'll be too late. Marcus moved closer, his weapon trained on Apex. We'll stop you. We'll stop all of this. Apex remained silent, their eyes unreadable behind the mask. Then, in one swift motion, they reached for a device on their belt. Marcus fired, hitting Apex's hand and sending the device flying across the room. The figure stumbled but didn't fall. Marcus closed the distance, tackling them to the ground and ripping off the mask. What he saw shocked him, a young woman no older than 25, with cold, calculating eyes. You're just a kid, Marcus said, disbelief in his voice. She smirked. Age doesn't matter. Belief does. Before Marcus could press further, she bit down on something, a cyanide capsule. Her body convulsed and she went limp. Back at headquarters, the team worked tirelessly to locate and disarm the bombs. Apex's death left many questions unanswered, but her devices were sophisticated, each one hidden in a strategic location designed to cause maximum destruction. Marcus sat in silence, replaying the night's events in his mind. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time he felt the enormity of the battle ahead. Then his phone buzzed. The message was chilling. "You killed one of us. You can't kill the idea. See you soon." Marcus stared at the message, his heart pounding. The words were clear. "You can't kill the idea. See you soon." Despite capturing Dagger and uncovering Apex's role, the network had proved resilient, more like a hydra than a single entity. Cutting off one head seemed only to reveal more. Lila walked into the room, her face tense but composed. "Was that another message?" she asked softly. "Yes," Marcus said, showing her the screen. "They're still out there. They're not stopping." Lila's expression hardened. "But neither will you." Marcus nodded, her words fueling his resolve. "We've taken down their leaders, disrupted their operations, and dismantled a major attack. But this fight isn't over. Not yet." The next morning, Marcus met with Captain Barnes and the team. The atmosphere was heavy with both accomplishment and frustration. They had made significant progress, but the enemy remained in the shadows. "We've identified a few more high-level members of the network," Barnes said, pointing to a series of photos displayed on the briefing room wall. "These individuals are coordinating cells across the country. If we can take them out, we can cripple their ability to organize." "What about the bombs Apex mentioned?" Marcus asked. "Were we able to find all of them?" Barnes nodded. "The bomb squads disarmed every device before they could be detonated. The city is safe for now." "For now," Marcus repeated, his voice low. "But they're not going to stop." "No," Barnes agreed. "But we're staying ahead of them, and we'll keep it that way." Over the next few days, the team launched simultaneous operations to apprehend the remaining leaders. Marcus participated in each one, moving with precision and focus. With each raid, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place: documents, communications, and financial records that revealed the network's funding and recruitment strategies. But one name kept surfacing in the intel: the architect. "Who is this architect?" Marcus asked during a debriefing. "Another leader?" "More than that," one analyst replied. "The architect seems to be the founder of the entire network. Everything traces back to them." Barnes leaned forward, his expression grim. "If we find the architect, we end this." The breakthrough came when the team intercepted a series of encrypted messages revealing the architect's location: a remote fortified estate in the mountains. The messages suggested that the architect was planning one final act of defiance: a large-scale attack designed to galvanize the remaining members of the network. "This is our chance," Barnes said. "We're mobilizing everything we've got. This ends now." The raid on the estate was the most dangerous mission Marcus had ever undertaken. The estate was surrounded by armed guards, surveillance drones, and traps designed to deter intruders. The team moved under the cover of night, their every step calculated. As they breached the perimeter, gunfire erupted. Marcus and the others pushed forward, their training and teamwork carrying them through the chaos. They cleared the outer buildings one by one, taking down guards and securing the area. Finally, they reached the main house. Inside, the architect waited. The interior of the house was eerily quiet. Marcus led the team through the dimly lit hallways, his weapon raised. As they entered the central room, they found the architect sitting at a large desk, surrounded by monitors displaying live feeds of the raid. "So, you've come," the architect said, their voice calm and composed. They were an older man dressed in a simple suit, with an air of authority that radiated even in the face of defeat. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Your network is finished." The architect smiled faintly. "You think so? Do you know why I created this movement? Because the world is weak. Divided. People like you cling to ideals, but ideals don't bring order. Marcus tightened his grip on his weapon. Your order is built on fear and hate. It doesn't deserve to exist. The architect's smile faded. You're naive. People like me don't disappear. Even if you kill me, someone else will rise to take my place. Not today, Marcus said. The architect reached for a device on the desk, but Marcus was faster. He'd fired, shattering the device and disarming the architect before they could act. The team moved in, securing the architect and dismantling the remaining equipment. Back at headquarters, the architect's arrest marked a turning point. The network's communications went silent, its cells scattered and leaderless. The city began to breathe easier, the threat of imminent attacks finally lifted. But for Marcus, the fight wasn't truly over. That evening, Marcus returned to the safe house, where Lila waited for him. She embraced him tightly, her relief palpable. Is it done? She asked. For now, Marcus said. We've stopped them, but there's always more work to do. Lila nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Marcus smiled, holding her close. Together. As the night settled over the city, Marcus sat by the window, reflecting on everything they had endured. The battle against hate was far from over, but he knew he wasn't fighting alone. And as long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, the future would remain worth fighting for.